What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Maylari. So today, I'm going to talk about the Red Sox shocking decision yesterday to trade Rafael Devers to the San Francisco Giants. Going to give my thoughts on why I think this happened. I'll give my thoughts on the return that the Red Sox got, whether or not they should have gotten more or less. And then I will also give my thoughts on what this means to the Red Sox in the short term and the long term windows. So let's start off with my instant reaction. I had a flag football game yesterday. The second the game ended, I look at my phone and I get a notification that the Red Sox have traded Devers. And when I first saw it, I thought it might not be real. At the end of the day, the Red Sox won 8 of the last 10 games, won 5 games in a row, just swept the New York Yankees at home at Fenway. Now they're 5-1 against the Yankees on the season. And vibes just seem to be elite for the Red Sox, especially after this weekend. I went to the game Friday night. Part of the reason I still am struggling with my voice, but I went to the game Friday night, and it was an awesome win. The Red Sox won in extra innings. You saw everything in that game. Great pitching, clutch hitting, really good defense. It was a great game both ways. Some gutsy moves, which Aaron Boone made a couple really gutsy moves in that game. For one, sending Anthony Volpe from second base, trying to have him steal third base at the start of the top of the 10th inning. That was a gutsy move, which the Yankees ended up losing that on a challenge, which it was a really close call. And then also, there was another close call where there was a foul ball down the line, which this was with 2 outs in the top of the 10th, nobody on base. DJ LeMahieu kind of hooks the ball down the right field line, and LeMahieu and Boone both believe that it was a fair ball. They thought some of the ball caught the foul line, which if it hits any part of the foul line, it's a fair ball. And honestly, in their review, in my opinion, I thought it did hit the line. I thought it could have been ruled a fair ball, could have been ruled a foul ball, could have gone either way. But if it was up to me, I thought that was a fair ball. So Aaron Boone goes out, argues with the umpires, gets thrown out of the game, throws his gum onto the field. And that was a very electric moment to be in the crowd. Whether a Yankees fan or a Red Sox fan, you could tell the tensions were high. The energy in the stadium was ridiculous, right? It was awesome. It was a really fun environment and a great game to be at. And then after that, the Red Sox get the third out. They end up going into the bottom of the 10th inning. They end up winning on a walk-off hit by Carlos Narvaez, which was an awesome end to the game. Obviously, the Red Sox have a great celebration on the field with a walk-off win against the Yankees, especially with a sold-out crowd. As I mentioned, the environment, the energy, everything was rocking. It was awesome. And one move I want to mention, though, in that bottom of the 10th, Aaron Boone, which he was in the clubhouse at this point. He did get sent out of the game. He was kicked out, went to the clubhouse. He and the rest of his coaching staff made the decision for the Yankees to use 5 infielders at the end of the game. So they basically took their right fielder, or I should say their center fielder, Cody Bellinger, brought him into the infield with 1 out, and they took Aaron Judge, took him from right field, put him in center, and they left right field wide open, which was a gutsy move. It ended up working out for the Yankees. They got the second out and almost got themselves out of the inning. And after they got that second out, they put Bellinger back in the outfield and readjusted. But I thought that was a really gutsy move. You saw a lot of good things in this game on Friday night. And then the Red Sox won Saturday, and they won Sunday. And obviously, yesterday's game was an emotional one, too, considering it was a close game. Rafael Devers even hit a home run in that game. Things just seemed to be really working out for the Red Sox over the last week. They won 8 of the last 10, got themselves back in the AL wildcard race. Things were really looking up for this team. And then yesterday, as I mentioned, yesterday evening, get a notification that the Red Sox decided to trade Rafael Devers to San Francisco. And my immediate thoughts were, I wasn't completely shocked. Was it a shock with the timing? Yes. I did not expect him to get traded right now, especially in the middle of the season, especially with the Red Sox just sweeping the Yankees. I didn't expect that at all. But for the last couple of years, I've said that, me personally, I would at least contemplate trading Devers if the package was right. I've stayed pretty firm over the years that I expect more from Devers, considering he got a big-time extension, $313 million from the Red Sox a few years ago, and he also has been basically the face of the franchise the last few years, especially after trading Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts leaving in free agency. Devers became the face of the franchise. And then you adding, obviously, Chris Sale getting traded as well. Devers became the face of the franchise, and I never felt like he lived up completely to the face of the franchise title, which the face of the franchise in my eyes means a guy that's a leader in the locker room, means a guy that obviously is performing on a daily basis, and a guy that's one of the best players in the game. When you're playing for the Boston Red Sox, one of the most storied franchises in sports, if you're the face of the franchise of the Red Sox, you usually expect that guy to be a top 10 player in the game of baseball. With Devers, I never considered him a top 20 player in the game of baseball. I think he's outside of the top 25, if I'm being completely honest. It has nothing to do with him getting traded. I've stayed pretty firm with that over the years. I consider him just outside of the top 25 in the game of baseball, and maybe even a little bit lower than that. He's a good baseball player. I don't consider him on the same level as Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, even Mike Trout in his prime. Like, I never saw him on the same exact level as those guys. So when I look at this trade, I wasn't completely shocked because it wasn't like you were trading Mookie Betts again, which it's similar in some regards. Don't get me wrong. Devers was here for a World Series title in 2018. He's only 28 years old, was having a good year, especially after struggling early on. And then you add in the fact that he's a 3-time All-Star as well and still young. It is shocking. But Mookie Betts, when you traded him, you were trading an MVP candidate who was one of the best players, not only in the American League, but the game of baseball. Was a top 5 talent in the game of baseball. It was a very difficult move for the Red Sox to make. But with the Mookie Betts trade, this is a little bit different than Mookie Betts getting traded, because Mookie Betts, for a week or two before he was traded to the Dodgers in 2020, there were a lot of rumors that the Red Sox were going to trade him and that there was a lot going on with the contract negotiations where the two sides were around like $80 to $100 million away from each other, and it just seemed like the Red Sox and Mookie Betts were never going to find the middle ground and keep Mookie Betts in Boston. But I always felt like Mookie Betts wanted to be on the West Coast. Obviously, being in LA, living there, he's a superstar player with obviously a big sports market just like Boston, but LA is even bigger. I expected him to want to leave and go to a big-time place like LA. Like, I wasn't shocked with that. I think it worked out for Mookie Betts. He's won 2 World Series rings in LA. He's playing with Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, Clayton Kershaw, Blake Snell. He's played with so much talent around him over the last few years. I think things worked out for Mookie. I do think he wanted a new beginning and wanted to leave Boston. So the Red Sox, obviously, when you're $100 million off in the negotiations, it made sense to move Mookie Betts when he was going into the last year of his team control. The Red Sox weren't going to give him an extension that they could agree upon. It only made sense to trade Mookie Betts. Obviously, the return did not end up working out. You end up really only getting Connor Wong back with Verdugo now being gone and Jeter Downs not really panning out. The Red Sox didn't get as great of a return as they wanted to, and I think obviously part of that was David Price's contract being 50-50 split between the Dodgers and the Red Sox. You're going to lower the return you get when you have a team chewing money in the deal. So obviously that did play a little bit of a role with the Red Sox not getting as good of a prospect probably back in return, but the Dodgers were absolutely fine with chewing some of David Price's money, especially considering when they could have used an extra pitcher, which you can never have too many pitching. He ended up obviously being a part of that 2020 World Series team, and in return they also got Mookie Betts for, chewing his contract in that deal. But the Mookie Betts trade was more difficult for me. This Rafael Devers trade, I was fine with at the end of the day. I was fine with the Red Sox trading him. I know I'm probably in the minority and people are going to disagree with me. But like I already mentioned, it seemed like Devers never really lived up to an MVP expectations that everybody placed around him his entire time in Boston. And if you look at it, Devers never placed higher than 11th in the MVP vote in the American League. In his entire career in Boston, he has never placed higher than 11th in the MVP vote. So at the end of the day, Mookie Betts was obviously an MVP winner in Boston, won a World Series obviously in Boston with Rafael Devers in 2018. But Mookie Betts was the face, not only of the Red Sox, he was kind of like the face of the major leagues just about with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout when he was dealt in 2020. He was one of the best players in the game of baseball, and I think that's why it was more difficult for me to move on from Mookie Betts than Rafael Devers. With Devers, there was a lot more drama around him. Devers isn't the type of player to just play anywhere the team needs. We've obviously seen that now between the Red Sox offseason and even during the season. Rafael Devers was very obstinate to try a new position or even do what the Red Sox wanted to do in practice. It wasn't like they were throwing him out there and said, hey, go play first base tonight. This is your first time ever playing first base. We want you to go out there without any practice reps. They didn't even do that. They were just asking in practice, try to take some reps at first base after Tristan Casas went down, and he was completely obstinate and just very reluctant to try anything that the team needed to try to win games. So it only made sense for the Red Sox to at least contemplate a trade at some point. When a player becomes a problem in the locker room, you don't want to keep them around forever. And with Devers, obviously there was some disagreements. The Red Sox signed Alex Bregman in the offseason without telling Devers that Bregman would end up starting and playing third base, which that was something that Devers was upset with. They told Devers to essentially put his glove away and be the DH for the team, which he was very obstinate to do. Yet again, he was very reluctant to do anything that the team needed to try to win games. And he likely sat out during spring training because of that. I didn't really buy into he's trying to recover from an injury, which maybe he was rehabbing, but he also wasn't playing at all, not even hitting until about midway through March in spring training. So he wasn't willing to really even play in spring training games, and that was a worry for me. That was a cause of concern. That's why I think there was a disconnect with this team even during the season, even a couple weeks ago, and I had probably a week ago now, and I had my friend Brian on the podcast, I mentioned after a few of those losses, it seemed like the locker room was not falling apart, but it wasn't like everybody was locked in. There seemed to be some tension and some issues in the locker room. And I think that held throughout the entire season. I think you could see there was some sort of disconnect with this team. Now with the team winning 8 of the last 10 games, and they still decide to trade Rafael Devers, obviously this issue going on in the media, which obviously it was very well broadcasted and reported online and obviously even on TV, this issue with Rafael Devers was a lot worse than what was reported. Clearly, Craig Breslow and John Henry had a much bigger issue with Devers than what was written about online. And so Devers obviously sits out, as I said, until about mid-March through spring training. And I think that was out of spite, out of being upset about him no longer playing third base. And there were interviews with him saying that he's not going to go play first, he's not going to DH because he's a third baseman and that's what he was paid to do. But the Red Sox front office has changed since then. So Devers has to understand that with the business of sports, things constantly are changing, expectations are changing, situations are changing. So sometimes you just have to roll with the way things are going. If the team asks you to take a glove and go try to play first base in practice, why not go and try that if that's going to help the team win some ball games after Tristan Casas went down with a leg injury and is out for the rest of the season? Why not at least try it? And I was somewhat in the middle on this situation. The Red Sox probably should have handled the situation better with Alex Bregman and told Devers during the offseason when they were pursuing Bregman that he would probably be the third baseman if they do indeed sign him. And then at the same time, though, Devers should be a little bit more willing to understand where the Red Sox are going with signing Bregman. Bregman's a better defensive third baseman. It made sense when you need a right-handed bat in the lineup and a guy that could play better defensively at third base. It made sense for the Red Sox to go sign Bregman. So I think both sides could have been a little bit better. Devers and Craig Breslow could have handled that situation a little bit better. And I was on Devers' side to some degree because I don't think Devers would have been a great first baseman anyways. I don't think Devers going over to first base completely resolves the issue with this Red Sox lineup. This is a guy that struggled with his glove, obviously, at third base. You put him over at first base, the glove's still not going to be great over there. He still would probably have a tough time scooping, and it wouldn't be a seamless transition because I don't really think he necessarily had the footwork to go play first base. The arm wasn't the problem for Devers at third base. His glove was the issue at third base. Getting to balls, missing some down the line, that was an issue for him at third base. And I think that still would have been an issue for him at first base if he jumped over to play first. So I somewhat understood why he didn't want to go play first base. He really didn't want to go play first base because he said, okay, you told me to put my glove away. I'm not going to go play first base now. It wasn't more so from my perspective where I saw he's not going to be a good first baseman. He didn't want to go play first base because he basically was just sticking it to the Red Sox saying, hey, you told me to put my glove away. That's what I did. I'm playing DH because that's what you told me to do. But after Tristan Casas gets hurt, he was asked to play first base, and he ultimately said no and was very reluctant yet again to even listen to the Red Sox about going and playing first base. And then Alex Bregman gets hurt. Now third base is open. Did he consider playing third base? He did not. And right around this time, John Henry flies out to Kansas City to go meet with Rafael Devers and talk with him. And you have to probably assume that that meeting didn't go well with Rafael Devers and John Henry. Things must not have gone well. And the divide between Craig Breslow and Rafael Devers probably grew to a divide between Craig Breslow with John Henry versus Rafael Devers. I don't think it was just Breslow making this decision. You don't trade Rafael Devers without ownership signing off on this. And there must have been a disconnect between Devers and the entire Red Sox organization from the management side, where Craig Breslow is in baseball operations, all the way to the ownership side where John Henry is. John Henry's the one signing his checks. If you have a disagreement with the owner and you end up arguing with him in that meeting, who knows? John Henry could have went to Breslow and said, hey, go find a trade for him in the next few weeks. And here we are with the Red Sox trading Rafael Devers after a weekend sweep of the Yankees. You don't go and just do that on a limb. This was something that was the Red Sox have thought about for the last few weeks, probably the last month, probably since March when the issue between Bregman and Devers started, sometime during the beginning of spring training. And for my general thoughts on this situation, as I already mentioned, I expected the Red Sox to move on from Devers at some point. I said this a couple of years ago. I felt like Devers was overrated considering everyone expected him to be an AL perennial MVP candidate. As I mentioned, he only finished 11th once in his career, and every other time has either placed, 12th or 14th or not even in the picture at all. So I felt like he was overrated in that perspective. And then also I felt like he wasn't a good leader. He wasn't a great team player, not doing what the team needed. Whether or not he would have been a seamless transition over to first base, I still don't think he would have been a good first baseman, like I already mentioned. But you got to at least consider what's going on with the team and understand, okay, I should go try and play first base, even if I'm not the best answer, and even if I don't even like first base. If the team can win some ball games with me at first base, it's worth it. But Devers was all about himself, it seems. And I know people are going to say that the Red Sox ownership, they're going to try to twist it against Devers and say Devers was the real issue, which, as I already mentioned, both sides probably could have been better in the situation. But I do think Devers should have been a little bit more willing to at least listen to what could help the Red Sox in the short-term window. When Bregman goes down, maybe he goes over and plays third base again. Go take some reps over there for a week, and then maybe you'll be starting at third base a week from now. He just was never willing to listen to anything that could potentially help this team win ball games. So my general thoughts on the situation, I wasn't shocked that Devers was traded. I do think the Red Sox should have got more in return, and now I'm going to get into what the package was. But when I look at this package, the Red Sox should have got more in return, I think. But when you consider that the San Francisco Giants are going to take on about $250 million and pay the entirety of Devers' contract of what's left, they're on the books for it, not the Boston Red Sox. That's going to lessen your return. And then obviously there was a disconnect between the Red Sox, and they just wanted to get rid of them as quick as possible just to reset the culture and reset the locker room. And this shows to me that Craig Breslow and this Red Sox team wants to set a culture where guys want to play for the team, and it's not about me, myself, and I. They want guys that are willing to do whatever it takes to help this team win ball games. And Devers obviously was not that. He didn't want to go try to play third base after Bregman went down, didn't even consider to try to play first base after Casas went down, and was not happy when they signed Bregman. He didn't even want to consider being a DH at that time as well. Which, since that John Henry meeting, Devers was raking. He really was playing great baseball since he met with John Henry in Kansas City. Was one of the best hitters in the game, it seems like, since that moment. And this season, he's hit well overall. He did struggle in the first week of the season, but since then has played some good baseball. He's hitting .272 on the season for a batting average, 58 runs batted in, a .905 OPS with 15 home runs. So he's had a good season. This guy's had a good season, so it's shocking from that perspective, considering it's not like he was really struggling at the plate. And obviously, as I said, momentum was really rolling for the Red Sox as of late. The timing is shocking in my eyes. But I did say a few years ago that I thought Devers was a little bit overrated. I didn't expect him to really be a big-time leader under this contract, which if you're playing good baseball and you're not necessarily a leader, but you're not causing problems, it's fine. Devers was obviously causing distractions in the media, causing distractions between the team in the locker room, and there were obviously issues as well with John Henry and Craig Breslow with Rafael Devers. If you're a really good player and you're not causing distractions, but you're not necessarily a leader, that's fine at the end of the day. That happens all the time. There are guys that are really good players that aren't necessarily big-time leaders. People say Connor McDavid isn't a big-time leader, but he's so great at what he does and he's not causing distractions in the locker room. That's fine at the end of the day if he's not going to be the one that's very vocal and making speeches every night and the one, patting everyone on the back after every play. I think it's a little bit different with Devers, where Devers is a good player but wasn't a team player. It was about him and whatever he wanted. And as Pete Abraham said in a quote, essentially that he didn't really want to live up to the responsibilities that came with that $313 million extension. And here's the direct quote from Pete Abraham. The team's feeling was that a $313.5 million contract comes with the responsibilities to do what is right for the team, and that Devers did not live up to those responsibilities. They had enough and they traded him. And that's a quote there from Pete Abraham of the Boston Globe. And since that moment that John Henry met with him in Kansas City, he hit .290 since that moment with 8 home runs, 7 doubles, 32 runs batted in, and a .965 OPS in those 33 games since John Henry met with him in Kansas City. And that's a credit there to Chris Cotillo, a tweet from him with a breakdown of those stats. So after John Henry meets with you, seems like things probably didn't go well there, would be my guess. And even though he was hitting great over the last month, the Red Sox felt like the responsibilities that come with that big-time contract, that comes with being a team player, and Devers, in their eyes, did not live up to that. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot in the media that's going to be said about Devers. Some will be true, some won't be true. That's always what happens. There's always speculation and drama in the media. People are going to write things online. People are going to say things on TV. That's how it always goes. There's going to be some finger pointing from each way. Devers is going to say it was the Red Sox fault, and the Red Sox are going to say it was Devers' fault probably. And you never know. I'm really basing a lot of this off speculation. But from everything I've seen so far about the situation, from what I've read, I feel like Devers became too big of an issue in the locker room, and I think it was probably bigger than what was reported online. Seems like it was a much more of a rift between Devers and ownership and Devers and Craig Breslow. And that's what led to this decision to trade Devers. It wasn't that Devers isn't a good player. He's a very talented player. But when you become a distraction to the team, and the team feels like they aren't really clicking and the culture isn't really building because you've been a distraction and been very reluctant to try new things, to try to help the team win some ball games, that's when the Red Sox probably said, okay, we got to go in a different direction. I think both sides were fed up with each other, and even though it was never officially reported that Devers requested a trade, there was always speculation in spring training that he would at least contemplate maybe requesting a trade when things went pretty sour after they signed Bregman. And I'm sure there will be conflicting reports and people writing different things online and fans being upset one way or the other. And that's just how things go. That's the beauty of sports. There's always two sides to every story where sometimes it works out for the player, it doesn't work out for the team, and vice versa. But in this situation, I do think this puts a lot of pressure on the Red Sox big three, their young three top prospects, Roman Anthony and Christian Campbell and Marcelo Meyer, to really carry this team, considering Bregman's hurt, Devers is now gone, Yoshida's still hurt. They're putting a lot of pressure on these three guys to pan out and have heavy expectations for them right away. I think it's hard to replace Rafael Devers in the short term, so I do think this is tough for the team right now, especially in the next month before Bregman gets back. This is a major loss for the lineup, so I do think in the short term, in the immediate right now window, I do think this hurts the Red Sox lineup. I think we're a worse team today than we were technically yesterday when you're losing 35 potential home runs out of your starting lineup. But if you can get Bregman back healthy, and maybe you add a piece at the deadline, and maybe you can use some of that $250 million that you're now saving from the remaining money on Devers' contract. If you can go out and find another piece that you can add to this lineup, basically plug them in and play, and they can be productive and be a good power hitter in this lineup, I think that'll be a big difference maker for this team. And that's how we'll know whether or not this deal works out for the Red Sox or not. I think from a bird's eye view, I don't think this deal necessarily was the best return for the Red Sox. When you factor in the Giants taking in all that money, I think that lessens what the return that the Red Sox could have got when you're giving the Giants basically $250 million to chew of that deal. But I do think the Red Sox grew upset with Devers, and when the owner that's signing your paychecks, you have a meeting with, and likely probably didn't go well, I think that was probably another step towards Devers' time in Boston coming to an end. There must have been a bigger issue in the locker room between Devers and maybe some of his teammates, Devers and Breslow for sure, and then Devers and John Henry. It was probably worse than what was reported and worse than what we know right now, because you're not going to ever get the full story. At the end of the day, the Red Sox have moved on a different direction. Devers is now in a different direction as well. And so we'll never probably get the full story. But from the outside looking in, I think this was worse than what was shown. I think this relationship is a lot more sour than what Devers portrayed in interviews. And even though he portrayed the situation between him and the Red Sox obviously being on a very bad note before the season began, and even at the beginning of the season, there was still a lot of speculation, as I said, about whether or not he would do what was best for the team, or at least try to go play first base or go try to play third base. He continued to stay firm that you told me to put my glove away, so I'm not going to go out and play third base and go play first base. I think this relationship is a lot more sour than what we even knew, and I think you'll probably know a little bit more in the next few days. You'll hear more quotes and hear more interviews, and you'll hear from Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy tonight at 8 o'clock, but you'll never get the full story. But from the outside looking in, you don't go out and trade Devers after you sweep the Yankees just for no reason. You don't go out on a limb unless you consider that he was a huge locker room issue, and you consider that it's an addition by subtraction. Even though you're obviously losing all of the power numbers that come with Devers' game, you're losing what was a distraction in the locker room, potentially something that could hurt the culture and the future of the Boston Red Sox. And we'll see how things pan out with what the Red Sox got in return. Now I'm going to talk about what the Red Sox got. So they got Kyle Harrison, a left-handed pitcher, a right-handed pitcher in Jordan Hicks, an outfielder prospect in James Tibbs III, and a right-handed pitching prospect in Jose Bayo. So let's start out with Kyle Harrison, the left-handed pitcher. He's 9-9 in his MLB career, a 4.48 ERA. He's only 23 years old. He was a former third-round pick of the Giants in 2020 and was at one point a top 25 prospect heading into the 2024 MLB season. So obviously there is a lot of upside in his game, and at one point was a highly touted prospect before now. Obviously he's no longer a rookie, but when he was a prospect and when he was a rookie, there was a lot of praise around his game and a lot of optimism about the type of play that he can be. In the minor leagues, he had a 3.33 ERA with a 10-9 record. If you look at his game, has a really good fastball, and I think there's a lot more to his game that he can develop, maybe potentially develop his curveball a little more, and I think Andrew Bailey can help with that. And I think the Red Sox are a potential left-handed pitcher with a lot of team control left, and who has a lot of upside, and at one point was a highly regarded prospect. And they said, all right, if we can get him in this deal with Devers, and you're adding in a couple other pieces as well, and essentially there were a couple lottery tickets in there with Jordan Hicks and then Jose Bello and even James Tibbs III. There's a lot, unknown with his game, and even Kyle Harrison. I think the Red Sox are taking chances on a lot of these guys, and that's what you do a lot of time with prospects or young players like Bello, like Tibbs, like Harrison. Those are three guys that are very young and have a lot left to establish in their game, especially Bello, who's only 20 years old, and then James Tibbs III, who's only played now in the minor leagues for a year. There's a lot that's unknown with their games, but this is essentially a lottery ticket to see if you can, strike it rich with one of these guys panning out and being a big-time player. You never know with prospects how they're going to pan out at the end of the day, so it's hard to really grade this trade from the Red Sox perspective right now. I think 2 or 3 years from now, you have a lot better idea of, what this trade meant for the Boston Red Sox and what it ended up doing for Rafael Devers. Now he's going to San Francisco. How does he do in San Francisco? I know he's raked in his time in the NL West when he's playing for the Boston Red Sox. He raked against those teams in the NL West division. So now he's in that division. He's going to play a lot of games against San Diego, the Dodgers, the Rockies. We're going to have to see how his numbers do over there, but you expect his numbers to still be pretty good. I'm not doubting his talent as a player. He's a really good player. I do think he was a little bit overrated. I never saw him as an MVP candidate, so I was a little bit easier letting go of him. I am still shocked at the Red Sox making this move, and especially with the timing of it. But I am not necessarily completely shocked that they decided to move him. I thought they would always potentially move him at some point in the future, especially if the return was right. The reason why in the past I thought they could potentially move him was I never really thought he was that MVP candidate, top 5 to 10 hitter in the game like a lot of people expect, which I always wish Devers the best. I'm a Red Sox fan, so I'm always going to root for him, and I wish him all the best in San Francisco. But I never really thought he lived up to the expectations of being, that next best player, face of the league, face of the franchise for the Boston Red Sox. Very good player, never was an MVP top 5 finisher during his time with the Red Sox. And I think that's what you have to be if you want to be a face of the American League. So with Harrison, there's obviously a lot still unknown with his game, but only 23 years old. As I said, there's still a lot more that he can develop. Maybe he can work on other things other than the fastball, work on the breaking ball. He has a slurve and a changeup that have decent metrics from what I'm looking at. He did average 95.1 miles per hour on his four-seam fastball in the major leagues this year, and also is holding opponents to a 175 batting average against it with an expected batting average of 213. That's a stat from Chris Smith of MassLive.com. But there's a lot of optimism. He was at one point the number 26 prospect in Baseball America's system and number 23 prospect in the MLB pipeline. If you look at his numbers in the major leagues, obviously this season, not the best of numbers with a 4.56 ERA and a 1.27 whip. His FIP is around 4.3, has a strikeout percentage of 25%, a walk percentage of 9%. There's definitely a lot more still unknown with his game. His fastball, as I said, is the most encouraging pitch. The changeup has definitely got some progression, it seems like, from what I'm reading. And he's under team control until 2029. So there is a lot of optimism about his game. The other player they got that was a pitcher in this deal was Jordan Hicks, who was very good from 2018 to 2019 in the St. Louis Cardinals bullpen, was a setup guy for them and was one of the best relievers in baseball at one point from a hard throwing standpoint. He was one of the hottest throwing pitchers in baseball during that stretch of 2018 and 2019. Then he got Tommy John surgery in 2019. He really struggled in 2021 and 2022. I think he missed the entire 2021 season, but then he struggled in 21 and 22. Walks were a major issue for him during those 2 seasons. He had a 9 walk per 9 innings rate in 2021, and then in 2022 he walked 5.1 batters per 9 innings, which is not great at all. In 2025 with San Francisco, he's a 6.47 ERA. He also has a 3.59 FIP and also a 3.56 expected ERA on the year, so he may be getting a little bit unlucky. And from what I'm reading, he's having a really hard time to get guys to chase this season. I looked at some of his percentiles over the last few years, and it seems like chase percentage is never something that's in his favor. He's only in the 6th percentile of chase rate this year. At 23% of the time his batters are chasing. And then in whiff percentage, he's in the 45th percentile with batters whiffing 24.5% of the time. Obviously, he isn't the pitcher he once was in 2018 and 2019, but maybe there is something that Andrew Bailey can work on in his game to help him be a really good reliever or be a starter for this team. I'm not sure what the Red Sox are going to do, but I do think he's probably more of a fit in the bullpen as of right now. Then James Tibbs III, 22-year-old outfielder, first baseman prospect, was the 13th pick in the 2024 MLB draft. A really good player with some good power, good contact hitting. I'm very high on him. I didn't know he was the prospect in the deal until about 30 minutes after it was announced. He's a player I saw play against BC when he was on Florida State. Saw him rake against BC, saw some really good talent when I was calling that Florida State versus BC baseball game last year. I believe it was on a Friday in the first game of that series in 2024. But I saw a lot of talent in his game. I wasn't shocked at all to see him go 13th overall last year and be a very high pick in the draft. If you look at his numbers at Florida State last year, he absolutely raked. 28 home runs, 95 runs batted in, a 363 batting average, with a 488 on base percentage, a 777 slugging percentage, and a 1264 OPS. In 176 college games, he had 55 home runs and also had 170 RBIs in those games. So almost an RBI per game was his average. I projected him last year in the draft as a potential cleanup hitter at the major league level. I do expect him to be a major league player at some point in the next couple seasons. And I do think he could be a number 4 hitter for the Red Sox for years to come. Obviously, you never know how a prospect's going to pan out. I could be completely wrong there at the end of the day. You never know how a guy's going to pan out, how he's going to do from the lowest level in low A all the way up to AAA and then the major leagues. You never know how a guy's going to pan out. But this is a guy that I was very high on as a prospect. So I was excited to see him in this deal. I know a lot of people don't know who he is, but I did see him play against BC last year. And like I already mentioned, saw a lot of talent in his game that I think can translate at the next level. In high A, he hasn't been great for average. He's only hit 246 for batting average, but has an 857 OPS with 12 home runs and 32 RBIs. He has a very good strikeout percentage and a very good walk percentage. He's only striking out 17.5% of the time and walking 16.5% of the time. So there are some good numbers there from him, and we'll see how he works out for the Red Sox. Like I already mentioned, I think he is a potential cleanup hitter for the Red Sox for years to come. I'm very optimistic about his game. And Jose Bayo, the Red Sox guard as well. He has a 2.0 ERA in rookie ball so far and 8 relief appearances. You never know how a guy's going to pan out that's playing in rookie ball. Still a long ways away, as I already mentioned. He's a young pitcher, only 20 years old, I believe. But at the end of the day, I do think this isn't the best return the Red Sox could have got. If you wait things out, maybe you could have got a stronger return. There were only a few teams, the Braves, the Padres, the Blue Jays, and also the San Francisco Giants that talked to the Red Sox over the last week, it seems, about a potential Devers trade. There was only one team that was really serious about it and were a lot more urgent about it than the other 3 teams, and that was the Giants. They were ready to go all in. Buster Posey, obviously being the head guy there for them. He's the current president of baseball operations in San Francisco. He was really aggressive with this move, even though he didn't really have to give up as much as you'd expect, and I do think the Red Sox should have gotten more in return. And I know Devers, they are chewing $250 million of what is remaining on his contract. The Red Sox aren't paying him another dime. So I know that does lessen what you're going to get in return and probably hurt you from getting another prospect maybe, even maybe one of the top 3 prospects. Tibbs was their 4th prospect overall. I think he's going to be a top 100 prospect in the next rankings probably sometime in July. So I wouldn't be too worried about him not being a top 100 prospect. I do expect him to be at some point soon. As I said, I think he has a lot of talent. But Posey was very aggressive with this move. He saw an all-star hitter and a slugger who is a really good talent that was at a cheap price, considering the Red Sox just wanted to get rid of him, it seems, considering how toxic everything got. And the Red Sox made the move to trade him. I do think they could have gotten more in return, but we'll see how things work out. I'm not completely devastated by this move. Was I shocked at the timing, like I already mentioned, and now I sound like a broken record? I was shocked at the timing of it, but something had to give in this situation. The Red Sox and Devers, the relationship soured, and it seemed like it couldn't be salvaged. It couldn't be saved. The situation between Devers and the Red Sox just could not be saved, and that's why the Red Sox chose to go in a different direction. I do give Breslow some credit here. You don't go out and trade him without having some guts. You obviously know the fan base is going to turn against you for the most part and be upset with it, and a lot of people are going to question why the Red Sox did this. And like I already mentioned, this does hurt them in the short-term window right now, the way things stand. Masataka Yoshida, I do think at some point could be that replacement at DH. My favorite player on the Red Sox. I think he could be a major piece for this lineup and be a really good hitter for us. But when you're losing that power with Devers being gone, you don't really replace that right away, right now. So a lot of people are questioning whether or not this hurts the Red Sox in the short-term window. I think, tonight's lineup is not going to be as strong as yesterday's lineup when you don't have Devers in it. But there's a lot still left to go in the season. The Red Sox could go out and make a trade and use some of that $250 million on somebody. If they trade for them and give them an extension, or even in free agency at some point next offseason, they're going to spend that money somewhere is my expectation. But one last thing I want to just mention about Breslow, this took a lot of guts to do. I think this situation was different than the Mookie Betts trade. With Mookie Betts getting traded, you're trading an MVP candidate and a top 3 player in the game of baseball at the time, and he's still a top 10 player in the game of baseball talent-wise. Mookie Betts is electric to watch on a nightly basis. But when you trade Mookie Betts, I think this is a much different situation than trading Devers. And I think when they traded Mookie, the Red Sox were $50 to $100 million off in their negotiations. I think John Henry said, hey, if he's not going to take that $300 million, go out and trade him. He ends up getting traded to the Dodgers. I don't blame Chaim Bloom for trading Mookie Betts. I think that was an ownership decision saying we're not going to pay him and he doesn't want to take this contract we're offering him. So before he leaves in free agency after this year is over, go out and trade him and get something in return. And that's what the Red Sox ended up doing. They didn't really get as much in return as they would have liked, like I already mentioned. Definitely was a disappointing return and was not anywhere near the value of what Mookie Betts brings to the lineup every single day. But with Devers, I think this was a Breslow and a John Henry decision together. I think the Mookie Betts trade was ownership saying, hey, we're not going to pay him, so go out and trade him. I think that with this situation with Devers, I think Breslow and John Henry probably came to consensus. That's what my opinion is. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I do feel like both of them had issues with Devers that couldn't be resolved, and they said this is a distraction to the locker room and hurting our culture, so we're going to go out and move him. And whether or not that ends up being something that's beneficial for the Red Sox, who knows at the end of the day? We won't know for probably a couple of years. We could probably judge this trade, and everything's always going to be 20/20 vision and hindsight. You're always going to say, I wish I did this and I wish I did that. But when you're in the current moment and things have really soured with Devers and you got a trade package that you like, and it seems like the Red Sox liked this package, especially if they're going to trade him at the moment they did, they said, hey, we can't not do this. We got to do this now because we have a good return, at least in their eyes, and we don't want this to continue. And they sent Devers his way. Obviously, now he's in San Francisco, and I wish Devers well, was a part of that 2018 World Series team, was a very good talent, had some big-time hits for the Red Sox. But like I mentioned, I felt like overall he was overrated. I never saw him as an MVP candidate. Maybe a top 25 to 30 player in the game of baseball, but I never saw him as a top 20 player in the game. That's just my opinion. I know people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think if you're going to be a top 20 player in the game of baseball, you got to be a top 5 to 10 MVP candidate each and every year. And Devers has never finished above the 11th place in the MVP vote in the AL ever in his career. So that was just something I pointed out. Awards aren't everything. Value can't just be, summed up by how many awards a guy gets during the season with Player of the Weeks, and then obviously in the off seasons with the MVP vote and the Cy Young vote, which both get voted on after the season ends. So those are my thoughts on the Rafael Devers trade. If I'm looking at the trade right now, I do think the Red Sox should have gotten more in return. I do. I think you maybe should have gotten another top prospect or an established player, which if you look at the Juan Soto deal with the Nationals and the Padres, the Nationals came out the clear winner of that move, if you look at it now, and it's all in hindsight, but when the deal happened, I thought the Nationals got a great haul of prospects, and now you look at 3 players that you got to build around for the future: Mackenzie Gore, C.J. Abrams, and James Wood. Then you have Robert Hassel III as well, and Harlan Susana. They got a great haul of prospects there. I wish the Red Sox got a couple more surefire prospects. You never know if a guy's going to completely pan out. I do think Tibbs has a lot in his game that fans would be a fan of, and I think there's a lot in his game that you should like, and I think he's going to be a top 100 prospect some point rather soon. You never know how guys are going to pan out, like I mentioned, but that's a guy I'm very high on. But I do think the Red Sox should have gotten maybe something more in return of an established MLB player right now. I think this is similar to the Luka Doncic trade based on how shocking it was when it happened. Like I mentioned, I expected Devers to be moved at some point. I said a few years ago, and I have multiple texts with people from 2023 and 2024 saying by year 3 or 4 of his contract, and now here we are since that extension, sitting here in 2025, and I said back then that if the Red Sox were struggling and were still the bottom of the division, that by year 3 or 4, the Red Sox would potentially trade Rafael Devers. And I've always been on the side that I would trade Devers if the package was right. I do think the Red Sox could have gotten more in return, just like with the Luka Doncic trade. That was a shocking move. No one expected Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis to get traded for each other. I do think maybe Dallas could have gotten a few more draft picks in return, even though Anthony Davis is a great talent. You are trading a 25-year-old Luka Doncic, who is one of the top players in the game of basketball. For the Red Sox, we'll see how things pan out. I'm going to probably do another episode on this at some point soon, but I just wanted to get all my thoughts out there before more news comes out and before the Red Sox talk about it tonight at 8 o'clock with Craig Breslow and Sam Kennedy talking to the media tonight on Zoom at 8 o'clock. Just wanted to get my thoughts out there. Some people are going to disagree with me that Devers should have never been a tradable piece. Some people will agree with me that if he's that much of an issue in the locker room, it might make sense to move on from him. I think we can all agree that at the end of the day, we want what's best for the Boston Red Sox. And if this ends up working out for them in the future and the culture is revitalized and maybe a couple of these players pan out that they got in return, maybe people will look at it a little bit differently. I'm optimistic about this deal just because I felt like Devers could always be moved. That's something now I've already mentioned a few times. I always felt like Devers could be moved, especially if the package was right. And if you look at how things have soured over the past 2 or 3 months, the Red Sox just grew frustrated with this whole situation. It seems like they just said, you know what, let's get ourselves out of this situation. So it's definitely tough to replace him in the short term. You're not going to just find a replacement overnight for him. You're not going to make up the 35 home runs and 120 RBIs and a 280 batting average overnight. I think in the short term, it hurts the Red Sox right now. But I think in the long term, I don't think this will necessarily be the worst thing. I think having some freed up money might help. And also, you don't want this situation to continue to get worse and Devers to become more disgruntled in the front office and obviously ownership as well to get more upset with the way things are going. It seems like both sides, Devers' side and the Red Sox side with Breslow and Henry, seems like going in their different directions might be the best for each of them. And like I noted, time's going to tell. You never know how a player or a prospect in a deal is going to work out. I think with Rafael Devers, like I noted, I thought he was a little bit overrated. I've said that now for some years. You can listen to any episode I've mentioned when I was at BC on the radio. I felt like he was a little bit overrated. Still a good player, still an all-star for sure, and one of the top hitters in the game. I just didn't consider him a top 25 player, and that's when you consider pitchers and hitters together. I don't consider him a top 25 player. I don't consider him a superstar like some people in MLB Network were saying today. I think he's an all-star for sure, and he's a top 15 to 20 hitter. I would say a top 20 hitter in the game, probably top 15, and then a top probably 30-ish player. I don't consider him, though, like I noted, a top 25 player in the game of baseball. When you include pitchers and everything in there, I don't consider him a top 25 player. I'd probably have him somewhere around 30. And that's me not trying to go against Rafael Devers. As I said, he brought us a World Series here in 2018. It was a good part of the lineup as well over the years, especially after Chris Sale was traded and the locker room changed once he was gone, and Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts and J.D. Martinez. Once all of them were gone, it was a different core with this Red Sox team. And now he's the last guy remaining. Before this trade, he was the last one remaining from that 2018 World Series roster. So the Red Sox will look a lot more different tonight. I think in the short term it's going to hurt, especially, as I said, right now trying to figure out who his replacement is. I'm very high in Masataka Yoshida. I voice that very often here in the podcast. But you don't make up Rafael Devers' power with Yoshida in the lineup or, some other player that you can just place in every other day at DH. You don't make up for that right away. But I don't think the package that they got in return was as bad as everybody's making it seem. Just a lot's unknown with these guys, and I feel like a lot of the time you trade an all-star, you don't necessarily get an all-star back in return. When you trade Mookie Betts, you didn't get a Mookie Betts back in return. That's the tough thing about trading for prospects or guys that are young and still have potential but haven't completely panned out. You got to look at it this way, though. It's a business at the end of the day. You can't be shocked when players get traded now because it is a business. Luka Doncic got traded when nobody ever expected him to ever even be available via trade. Anyone can be dealt at any time. It is a business. Once you become disgruntled and there's some issues between ownership and the player or coaching and the player, sometimes they go in a different direction. That's what the Red Sox did here. Does this mean the Red Sox completely blow it up and trade Jarren Duran and trade Trevor Story and trade Walker Buehler? I don't necessarily expect that right now. I don't. I think they're probably going to keep the guys they have right now for right now and then see how things go and reevaluate around the trade deadline whether or not they should add another bat, add a relief pitcher, or completely, blow things up and maybe trade guys. Alex Bregman can opt out after this year is over. That obviously was the start of the disconnect between the Boston Red Sox and Rafael Devers, was signing Alex Bregman and then letting him play third base. Like I already noted, I think that's why Devers kind of sat out of a lot of spring training games. And Bregman could potentially opt out after this year's over, and then you lose Bregman and Devers. So the Red Sox have some homework to do to figure out by the deadline, because let's say they know Bregman's going to opt out, and the Sox are out of the wild card race by the All-Star break, or maybe around the trade deadline. Maybe they completely blow things up and they trade Bregman knowing he can opt out after this year's over and try to get something back in return. That's just speculation. We never know how things are going to play out and how things are going to pan out. One thing I will say, though, I don't think this package was as bad as everybody's making it seem. I do think the Red Sox should have gotten more, with that being said, but I don't think it was like, the Red Sox got nothing back. Kyle Harrison has a lot of potential. Same thing with James Tibbs III. And then Jordan Hicks has struggled, but maybe there's something that Andrew Bailey can work on with him to try to get him on track. And if you look at this locker room, maybe this would be a tighter locker room. Who knows? There was some sort of issue in the locker room. Like I noted on my podcast last week, there was an issue in the locker room after a few of those 3 or 4 losses in a row with losing a lot of one-run games. it just didn't seem like guys were locked in. It seems like there was some sort of disconnect and there was some sort of issue in that locker room. It didn't seem like everybody was passionate and supporting each other. It didn't seem like it was a great culture in that locker room. Rob Refsnyder talked after one of the games saying how frustrated he was, and you could just see his frustration in his face. You could see he just wanted to win games, but it felt like the guys around him weren't playing like that. That's what I saw. When I looked at him and how frustrated he was, it seems like he was just upset with everybody around him, not because of the way they're performing. You can never point fingers and say, oh, you went 0-4 today, you're the reason we lost. He was really frustrated because it seems like he was the only one that really cared. I haven't seen any passion out of a guy like that this season when they were losing and when everyone was upset. You didn't see that passion out of those guys. You could see that they were definitely uncomfortable with the losing and definitely upset and disappointed. You didn't see that out of guys besides Refsnyder. Devers gets paid $313 million in an extension. You don't have to be the captain of the team and be the vocal leader every single game and be the one that talks to the media for the team when you lose like Eli Manning always did. You don't have to be that. There are some responsibilities and expectations that come with that big-term contract, like being a good team player and doing whatever the team needs, doing whatever the team asks of you. Even if you don't end up wanting to play first base, you don't want to go back to third base, you don't want to be a DH, whatever it may be, you got to at least try to do what's best for the team. And I understood somewhat where Devers was coming from. They told him to put his glove away, and he said, you know what, now I'm not going back out there to third base. Somewhat I understood because he said, you know what, if you tell me I'm the third baseman and then you sign Bregman and all of a sudden now Bregman's the third baseman and you didn't tell me that beforehand, he felt like his trust for the Red Sox was gone. And that's why he potentially maybe even asked for a trade. Who knows? That's all speculation. I'm sure there'll be more that comes out about that at some point. But I do think the trust between the Red Sox and him, their connection and their relationship was completely soured. And that's why he was disgruntled and probably upset with the way things were going. And that maybe was a distraction in the locker room. And maybe John Henry, after that meeting with him, said, you know what? I don't want to pay this guy his checks anymore. Time to let go. And if you look at David Ortiz and what he said today, you employees, and this is a quote from David Ortiz, you employees go against the check signer. See if you go in the last 2 days. I did everything they told me to, and today I'm earning a lifetime salary from the Red Sox and everyone there loves me. He also added in this. He said, players need to take this as an example. Nobody is indispensable. You need to be smart and you need to understand the situation. Your worst enemy is your ego. Seems like the ego of Devers got in the way here. And I don't mean to make this an episode where I'm going at Devers because I don't want to do that. I think Devers is a really good player, like I noted. Probably a top 15 to 20 hitter in the game of baseball. So he's one of the best hitters in the league and one of the most dangerous hitters in the league. And obviously won a World Series here in Boston. So I don't want to make this all about going against Rafael Devers. And there's always two sides to a story. And a lot of the information that I've read about in the media seems like he was more of the problem than the Red Sox. With that being said, both sides could have handled this situation much better and much differently. And I think if the Red Sox look back, when spring training was coming around and they were still in talks with Bregman, they probably wish they could go back and say, hey, we might end up signing Alex Bregman. He might be the third baseman. Rather than just doing it and then saying to Devers afterwards, hey, you're no longer playing third base. They could have played that better, and Devers could have obviously been more understanding where the Red Sox are coming from. It's a two-way street. Both sides could have been better. And obviously now, with the way things have gone, both sides had to go in a different direction. I'm not sure what this means for the Red Sox and the playoff chances. I don't think this means they're completely done and out of the playoff race like a lot of people expect. They're only a half game out of the wild card right now. And if you get Yoshida back in the lineup, and maybe get Bregman back in the lineup soon, this Red Sox team could still be in the mix of things. I'm not completely giving up on this year. I do know, obviously, the expectations before the year began were a potential World Series run, and I thought they could very well be in the World Series this year. I expected them to at least be in the ALCS. Now with Devers being gone, expectations change. But like I noted, so many things change in sports every single day. So many things change in the world every single day. Everything is constantly changing and evolving, and you need to adapt. The Red Sox get rid of Devers. Now they have to adapt and find somebody to replace him. And that's not going to be an easy fix overnight, like I noted, especially considering his power, the best power hitter on the team, a top 15 to 20 hitter on the game. You don't necessarily just replace that overnight. And he's an all-star each and every year, just about, it seems like. So you don't replace that overnight. But the relationship between Devers and the Red Sox couldn't be salvaged. It couldn't be saved. Once Devers was asked to go play first base after Tristan Casas went down, and then once Bregman went down and they asked him to go play third base, and he basically said, you told me to put my glove away. Now it's your job to do your job and find a replacement for these injuries. Devers felt like it wasn't his job to do that. So once that happened and things soured, the Red Sox had to figure something out, and they went in a different direction. With that all being said, I expected probably another prospect to be dealt in return, but the Red Sox saved $250 million on this, and they can reallocate that money anywhere. Maybe they can use that money elsewhere and get somebody that can help this team power-wise or pitching-wise. You never know what they can do with this money, but hopefully they do end up spending it and using it on something that can be a valuable resource for this team in the short-term and long-term windows. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.